Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Film Posers. My name is Juan, and today I am joined by my lovely co host, Anna, and we're going to be talking about Licorice Pizza, directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. Now, we got invited to a screener. Thank you so much for the invitation. We got to see this film early. Lovely to announce, in Puerto Rico, will be premiering in the Fine Arts Theater and December 25th. Your Christmas gift from Paul Thomas Anderson, Licorice Pizza, which is coincidentally a similar date to the United States. They're more or less playing the same day in like a wide style release, I think, which is pretty amazing. Licorice Pizza. This is my second Paul Thomas Anderson film. Anna's the resident Paul Thomas Anderson fan.
Yeah.
You know, from following our podcast episodes, I met Phantom Thread and then I never wanted to meet them again. But this is it. I made it to Licorice Pizza. And if you don't know what this film is about, it's set in the San Francisco Valley in the 1970s, where the film follows a high school student who is also a successful child actor. Now, this stars Alana Haim, Cooper Hoffman, Sean Penn, Bradley Cooper, Benny Safdie, Skylar Gisondo, Mary Elizabeth Ellis, John Michael Higgins, John C. Riley. There is a really large ensemble here. And Anna, you had a great tidbit about the cast members, specifically one Cooper Hoffman, who is Philip Seymour Hoffman's son and
Yeah.
making his acting debut in this film.
It felt like a very bittersweet moment watching Cooper Hoffman on the big screen because some of you guys don't know, Philip Seymour Hoffman used to be a lot in mostly all of them PTA films. In memory of Philip Seymour Hoffman, he casted his son in this film. Going into a little bit of spoiler territory here, I really liked how in the film we see Gary, Copper Hoffman. He is a waterbed seller, and Philip Seymour Hoffman, he was a mattress seller in Punch Drunk Love. And I really like how the son honored his memory.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that, I didn't know that until you told me
Mhm.
before we recorded. That actually really adds a bit more to the film for me because it's a full circle moment between father and son, which unfortunately they're unable to do. Unfortunately, Philip Seymour Hoffman has passed away. He is very greatly missed. I will say what's interesting is you said he was selling waterbeds. And slight spoiler, but if you know more or less the production about this film, the beds are called. This is a half spoiler review, by the way. We're gonna tread lightly, as light as we can, but there are some things we have to say. The beds are called soggy bottoms. And what's so interesting is that the film, when it was in production, it wasn't called Licorice Pizza. It's called Soggy Bottoms. And we had a debate after our screening of do we want to call this movie Soggy Bottoms? Should we have called it Soggy Bottoms or Licorice Pizza?
Yeah, Soggy Bottoms sounded pretty funny and on track with PTA and just a little bit of his personality that we get to see in each film. And it's quirky, it's fun, it's sarcastic. I liked it. However, when it comes to Licorice Pizza, the title itself, at first you don't understand it because we don't know the context of the film or anything, but after we see it, it kind of makes sense. For those who don't know, the main relationship in this film, it's it's a 15-year-old with a 25-year-old, and
It's not going to go over well with many
that
people.
doesn't go well. That is not well. That's one of our main.
It's straight Call Me By Your Name, except the age gap is actually larger than Call Me By Your Name if you base it
Yeah,
off the novel.
and it's like one of the themes that we kind of criticize, but
Which we'll get into in a little bit.
yeah, if you think about it, licorice pizza, those two things don't go together. Just like the main relationship in this movie, the major age gap and the difference, they don't go together. I really like that wordplay that PTA did.
Yeah, it shouldn't go together. It shouldn't work. But for some people, and that definitely applies to characters in this movie, It worked for them. Do I think that's going to work with audiences? No.
No.
Obviously. Again, straight Call Me By Your Name. The age gap was criticized there. The age gap here is a little bit larger. There are a couple more elements into this that are very easily to criticize. But going back to the film, overall, though, before we get into our critiquing, I personally thought it worked great as like this early 70s Hollywood coming of age story. I thought the production design was great. It does something that is one of the very few things I appreciated about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood by Tarantino, in that it's setting the story in such a real way that you can't help but get drawn into the production design and commend it because it's really well done. I literally thought I was watching a film from the 70s. That's how good it was, the production design wise. So A plus there. The soundtrack, it was amazing.
It was a
I
killer
We were
soundtrack.
vibing, getting our live. It was just fantastic. It was a killer soundtrack. And I also like that it wasn't the score. Like it was the soundtrack was the score. There was an exact score.
Mhm.
Soundtrack was the score. And I love that. I really appreciate that. The performances are really great, especially from Alana Haim. I really loved her performance. While you may not like her character and her motives, there's a lot to discuss there. I will say, performance wise, she is one of the stars and the strongest in this film. She is one of the highlights for sure. True discovery there. And again, the film is aesthetically pleasing. But one of the things that I feel didn't work was the pacing, because it felt like I was watching a 6 hour, 4 hour miniseries from HBO Max, but I couldn't hit pause.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't pause. I was just stuck there the whole time, just going, all right, I'm here for the ride. Can I take a break? No? Okay, well, I'll just keep going. It took longer than I think it should have. By the time I saw it was like 2 hours and 12 minutes, I was like, really? I thought it was longer. But I don't know. Maybe that's me. I don't know. What do you think?
If you're not familiar with PTA and his filmography, he has a trademark, and he really likes to put a lot of work on the environment and aesthetic wise. And with Licorice Pizza, we kind of get, those vibes of Boogie Nights and Inherent vibes like coming up together. And he has a keen eye for production design, and it is amazing. The aesthetic in this film. He really knew how to recreate the 70s in here. Now, the soundtrack, I totally agree with you. Again, it is a killer soundtrack. I was vibing throughout the whole film with it. You're gonna see me going to Spotify and looking for the soundtrack.
I would buy the vinyl, quite honestly. I loved the soundtrack. I was like, there's a
Right.
vinyl for this? With all the songs? Maybe I need to cop. Maybe I need to cop my first PTA vinyl.
Now, story wise, this, I don't know about you, it felt like episodic.
Yep.
Definitely, because there was a lot of things going around and happening, and it was so different each time. And it definitely felt like an episode. An episode started and then it ended, and it was like a compilation putting on together into a giant film.
Yeah, it definitely felt at times like I was watching an HBO Max series, but I also tried to see it as so many things happen to these young people when they're in LA during those times. And they have so many stories of what they used to do, what happened because of the political climate, everything that was going on to them. So it felt like very much someone was trying to tell you all of the stories that happened to them during that time, and then just abruptly ends. Like, and that's all I remember. And that's where it ends.
Yeah.
I think that could have worked better as a series, yes, where there's more time to develop and more time to really sink in the details. However, even though I have a problem with the pacing, I kind of don't know how I could fix it as a movie. So I'm kind of like, do I give it a pass? Do I not give it a pass?
Again, Going back with the story and tying up with the age gap, we do see in these episodic events how there is a difference between the age and the behavior of both of them, because there is a specific scene where it just felt like she was the babysitter rather than the love interest. And we see it throughout the whole film and how she is kind of lost. She doesn't
Yeah,
know what to do. She's journeying for that youthfulness that, Gary radiates. But she has to grow up.
yeah. Slight spoiler here. This is where we have to get into
Yeah.
spoiler territory a bit. This is why it's a half spoiler review. But yeah, I agree there. Story wise, while it's not cohesive in some parts, it definitely feels like if you follow it as Gary's story, it's a little more palpable, it's a little more understandable. But what you mentioned about the being like a babysitter at some point, it kind of does feel like Gary was falling in love with a babysitter. And I know it's a story we've heard before, and some people try to pass off like, "Oh, you don't remember falling in love with your babysitter," and it's they kind of play off of that. I don't know if I normalize it, but they try to play off that. And story wise, yeah, I agree. She's definitely lost. She definitely wants to be young, but she also knows that with her age, she has to grow up. She has to get into the real world. And if you notice story wise, she's kind of latching on like a bandwagon. She goes to where she thinks she can find success and find herself because she has no idea who she is. She has no idea what she officially wants. She goes from one idea to another to see if it'll get her far enough to then realize, oh, this is what I want. This is what I've enjoyed. And you do feel that with her character. I'm not saying it's correct, but from that perspective, because I'm trying to play devil's advocate, I'm trying to play both sides here. I do see that as someone trying to make it seem like, well, I don't know who I am. Let me just try everything. And if I hate it, I leave. But on the other hand, the intentions behind the character at times weren't pure. And if you can tell at times, Gary, who once had this pureness, this, goody two shoes boy who was falling in love, at times got corrupt with being an adult. And you see that transition from adult wanting to be a child again to child becoming an adult and aging too quickly. And I do think that is part of what we see in the characters as their development.
So it's interesting how we see a contrast with both of them. How we see Gary, him actually succeeding in one of the business that he made, and thriving and seeking out more, and he lives a careless life. And then we have Alana, where she is the oldest, she is the adult in this relationship, and she tries to seek that youthfulness again with Gary, and feeling young and feeling careless because she wants to feel that. And it's just a very controversial thing that PTA showed within the film.
Real quick, you said she was the adult in that moment. She was the adult in that entire movie. The other one was a kid.
Yeah.
Because there is a huge age gap here, as we mentioned. PTA actually said in an interview, and I want to bring this up here, quoting, "That's not the story we made in any kind of way in terms of reacting to the age difference between Alana and Gary. There isn't a provocative bone in the film's body." To which, perception wise, I'm not a fan of, because there is a scene where it involves exploration, sexual exploration, and I'm gonna put this as lightly as I can. It kind of feels like it's a debate for
Yeah.
kids. Like, it's definitely an adult film, but you also feel like, well, is consent there? Is doing that without consent there? Like, it's confusing, and the age gap is real big. It's 10-year age gap, alleged.
Mhm.
I say alleged because I read a theory as a review that she lied about her age. She wasn't really 25. She was secretly 21 or something like that. That you act older, for example, to get farther in life or to intimidate someone. It's one of the theories I read. It was plausible, but it's still bad. It's still call me by your name level age gap.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And that's kind of a problem. The second problem this film has, which is completely unnecessary, in my opinion, is that there are racist jokes, I guess you can call them, because they
Mhm.
weren't funny, but they were racist in the sense that a certain character makes a very stereotypical accent of an Asian character, making it seem like she didn't understand what the other person was saying in English, but she was perfectly able to respond with no problem because it's you could tell the character understood what the other one was saying. But you bring that element to it, and I read somewhere else where PTA said, oh, that he was trying to depict realness of the era and how that happened, how that sometimes still happens today, and what he was trying to do was depict it accurately era wise. And here's where my hot take comes in. Just because you're depicting a real era where that happened, so PTA says, doesn't mean you need to include it in the film. It's one of the very things I had a problem with Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Just because it happens doesn't mean you have to mention it, right? Or include it because you feel it'll bring authenticity. It's unnecessary. You didn't need it. It didn't add anything to the film except making it a conversation piece as to why it's a fucked up piece of the film.
I felt that it was he went a little bit too far
Yes,
because he already, again, aesthetically wise, he already depicted the era
and beautifully. It looked
beautifully,
beautiful.
and with
It
the
looked like
score
the
too,
70s.
he already depicted that. So in a way, it just didn't make sense as to why you should add this racist joke. It kind of ruins the flow and the moment with the story because it
Yeah,
was fine. We were
it
fine
was
with it
flowing fine.
until that scene came up and we're like, oh no.
It's like everything's going well. You're having a nice
Yeah.
dinner, and then out of nowhere, you hear a bunch of plates crash on the floor. And you can't help but look, and you're like, "Holy shit, what happened here?" That's what happened in
Yeah.
that scene because we were doing well. I was actually vibing with the PTA film. Didn't expect that to happen, and then I hear those comments, which plot-wise, it didn't add anything. Didn't even add anything to the plot. Didn't add anything to the story. Didn't add anything to the character. It just made me hate the character who does it. And then it's like, oh, it's realness of the era, baby. No, you didn't need it.
Um,
You didn't need it. You really didn't need it. And in that same article that I found, it PTA said about addressing that in scene where the interviewer's audience was shocked and they gasped. PTA said, well, that's different. I think it would be a mistake to tell a period film through the eyes of 2021. You can't have a crystal ball. You have to be honest to that time. To which I would argue, no, you don't. You didn't need those comments. If you would have erased those comments, then people would only have to focus on the age difference. It's still bad, but the racism isn't necessary. And to make it authentic, it's not necessary. It
yeah.
really isn't.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of already did a great work with the production design and
Yeah.
the ambience and aesthetic wise in the film. You did an amazing job on that. I don't know what was the
Thank you.
need of adding that racist joke whatsoever. And it just, again, it kind of just throws you off. Then on the other hand, we have this toxic relationship. It is a very toxic relationship. And like I said at the beginning of this review, again, it's like it's licorice pizza. Those two things don't go together.
No, but for some people it works, but for a lot of others it doesn't.
It doesn't.
And for
No.
those characters it worked. For us though, no. You know what I would have liked to see now thinking about it, removed from the film after having analyzed it. If he would have been 18 and she had been 25, And he had been this Peter Pan style character of child at heart, still trying to figure out his way in the world, was a child actor growing up in Hollywood, trying to figure out who he is. And she's someone who is lost as well. Saying, I think it would have been maybe a little bit better because you don't have that huge gap in age, but you can also kind of keep the character similar to who he was. Like that was his first relationship. That was, his first discovery of what he thought love is. And I liked what you mentioned about the character because if it was his story, the innocence of it is quite touching at times. But in her perspective, when you follow her story, you question her motives as to why she's really there. And that's not really enjoyable or good because then you're like, well, are you there because he's successful? Are you there because you actually like him? You start to question all these things and then you don't like her character. And it's a shame because Alana Haim does such a good job.
It looks like the only one that progressed was Gary. Alana
Yeah.
literally just stuck. She tried because we saw her trying like getting out of the relationship and you know what, trying to become an adult.
Yeah, she had her moments.
But she didn't succeed. She just stayed how she is and it backfired.
And I do agree there. There's no growth between the characters, so you accept him. So that's why as his story, it works in parts. As her story, there's not much really to root for. Especially the way she talks to her family in that one scene.
You were seeing a child fighting with their parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where you also saw a bit of her motive where you're like, wait. Now I'm seeing some true colors come out.
Mm-hmm.
Not like this. I think I've seen this one before and I didn't like the ending.
So enough about talking about the toxic relationship.
Yeah, you could do a whole
Yeah.
analysis on their relationship, honestly. And I think it's time to talk about a character that stole the show, and that's Bradley Cooper.
He was there 15 minutes and he had the spotlight. Not the main characters, not Sean Penn, not everyone, only him.
Yeah, I think he's focused on in the trailer at times, and you do see his scenes in the movie. But I think what I enjoyed most about Bradley Cooper is he embraced being unhinged in a couple parts. And his character, he's a sleaze, but how he's depicted. And that's not really a role you see Bradley Cooper in or you know him for.
You don't know. You see him as that guy, the one that everybody wants, and then we have him totally unhinged
At a gas station.
in a gas station.
Yeah. He was very funny. He definitely had a great time in his role. You could tell he very much enjoyed bringing life into it. And I think having now seen it, you can't really tell who else would have done the role justice.
Definitely.
I think there he fits the part he's asked to play because he has a part as a figure, the 70s, but he has a very good job. He does a very good job. He still has a scene as it.
Yeah.
And Sean Penn too. He has a really good scene. His scene, though, I will say, was very much a turning point for some characters.
Definitely. It is a turning point for the main characters.
Yep.
Definitely Alana. And what about Benny Safdie's character?
I'll be honest with you. I didn't know it was Benny Safdie until I saw the credit.
What?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to the Safdie Nation. No. I didn't know it was him until I saw the trailer. I was like, oh, his character was pretty good. But I didn't expect his character, to be honest. That was one of the things where I was like, hasn't this movie gone on a little too long? Oh, we're getting to you now.
Yeah.
And then I stopped looking at my watch because I was entertained. He did a really good job with this role, though.
Yeah, and I like how his story per se, it is a character development with Alana, because there she kind of realized something that she was trying to avoid this whole time.
In reality, that's kind of the point of Licorice Pizza. He's a boy growing up in a world where he doesn't know how to be an adult. He's still obsessed with being a child, but he wants the best of both worlds, while she is looking for that ticket out of Encino and is willing to say or do what it takes to get her out of there or get her to a better life, which I think is definitely the point of the two characters, among other things. But yeah, Licorice Pizza, like you said, that's the way to describe it. They shouldn't go together. It worked for the characters, but audiences, I think, will have a hard time buying that relationship. Because while we enjoyed the piece overall, the film, even we have to critique that because it didn't flow for us. And it's something that you really don't know how it could have worked. At least for me, I didn't know how that could have worked.
Even though if you like the film, there is an elephant in the room that we need to talk about and address. We need to address the age gap, and we also need to address the racist jokes that it came along with the film.
It's okay to like the film because there are elements here that are worth liking and that are done really well. Acting, production design, soundtrack, everything we've mentioned. But I think you have to be transparent with the film that it's not perfect. And there are things in there that could have been fixed, did or weren't necessary, like those jokes that weren't necessary. They had nothing to the plot. And even that central issue could have been fixed in that writing stage. There are people liking this film, and we're not shaming them for liking the film. However, when it comes to this film, a conversation has to be had, because where one passes it off as presenting authenticity, realness, you also have to ask yourself, was it integral to the plot? It wasn't. Was it necessary? No. And that's something that I feel some people sweep under the rug and others will have that conversation. That's just the reality of it.
It's okay to have a conversation with this film, but you can still enjoy it on a very personal level.
Yeah, for some, this is going to be a love letter to California in the 70s, and for others, it's just not going to work for them because those issues are glaring and they've kind of ruined the experience for them. And quite honestly, that's to be expected with this film. You're either going to vibe with it or you're not. If you like this film, that's fine. If you don't like this film, it's all right. It's not going to be for everyone. Licorice Pizza does not work for everyone in real life and as a movie. So those are our thoughts on Licorice Pizza. Our mini analysis, our half spoiler review. It kind of gave you a lot more than you expected. When it comes to our consensus, I definitely think it's safe to say check it out at your own risk. If you've heard the conversations and you're not interested in watching it, no problem. But this is a film that is going to keep a lot of people talking because these issues are something that need to be addressed. And, there's no shame in that. Not every film is perfect, unless you're Shrek 2. And with that, we conclude our review of Licorice Pizza. The consensus, you can watch this film for yourself on starting Christmas Day. Judge for yourself. Know that it won't be for everyone. If you want to keep these topics in mind, you should. However, it's a very similar experience of either you're into it or you're not. And that's okay. Because you know what? Licorice Pizza itself, Licorice on Pizza, is not for everyone. Licorice Pizza the movie is not for everyone. But for others, it's going to be a journey that they'll enjoy. And that's okay too. Because not every film is for everyone. Not every film is perfect. Unless you're Shrek 2. So thank you so much for watching our video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like, comment on our video. What are your thoughts on Licorice Pizza if you've seen it? Share our video, subscribe to our channel, follow us on our socials, and subscribe to our channel. And remember, we're all film posers. Bye.
Bye.